Awesome. So found something recently. Fast.ai has an AI course that is completely free that you can take. And this is not like a surface level AI course. This goes deep into deep learning. It's called AI for Coders. And essentially it is for people who have a technical background, who are not afraid to get in and start writing some Python code. Fast.ai has built some libraries that sit on top of PyTorch that make it easier to do modeling and AI stuff locally, writing very, very little code. And what's really cool about it is, the course goes deep into how you train your own models and combine models and all of that kind of stuff, and like explains to you exactly how the weights get set and what happens with all of that, right? And then what that opens up the door to is then you go into huggingface.com, which if anybody is familiar with that, I mean, people listening might be familiar with Hugging Face. Hugging Face hosts tons of different models and data sets you can then grab. And now with this new knowledge about how all this works, you can grab your own models and then string them together for your own purposes and also train your own. And here's something that I found out that was fascinating in this in the course that I learned the other night.
Bless you.
We talk about like training models, and we talk about the data needs. Oh my gosh, you need so much data to train a model well. You need so much data to train a model well. Well, what they found was, generally speaking, most models, almost all the time, get the best results from fewer than 50 pieces of training material. 50.
Yeah, so
that's all it takes.
I told you I'm obviously doing this course for fun, and I'm building it out on account management, right? And how to grow accounts and how to use product management and all that other stuff. Well, I created my own personal GPT yesterday, and I loaded the book, and I basically said the purpose of this book is this GPT is to self-referentially improve the materials that I give you. So evaluate the materials, and any place that you think you can improve it, give me the before, what it said, and then tell me how you think what it should be after. And so I create a self-referential material that all it does is look at the knowledge that's already there to see how I write, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And anyway, so it's like, why is that better? Well, it's because the only knowledge it has to use in this context is the knowledge that I've provided. So it's more likely to actually mimic my style.
Yep.
So, and
that's really interesting.
Yeah. I thought you would like that. So, and
write stuff, put it into the AI, then have the AI use that to write more, put that back into the AI. So it's like, this recursive loop of kind of write, read.
And as I said, I met with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about AI stuff, and we were talking about how to build some data sets and those kinds of things. And one of the things I said was that what we found is large prompts with large sets of data perform better in some things and worse in others. And so depending on what you want, if you want a very hyper specific, really targeted output, you're actually better off not sending it everything, but only sending it the small portions that you're trying to get the output around, and then chaining prompt to prompt to prompt to prompt, so that each prompt is more hyper specific instead of a generalized prompt. Which, by the way, like completely validates what you're saying. Like, in this case, it's still the same LLM, but we're providing lots and lots of context. You can get better results in some things and worse results in others. And so it's a really weird like dichotomy. And I found that you really have to test every single prompt or model differently every single time, depending on where you're at. And the really annoying thing is every time they update, you have to retest everything to see. Does it still work best this way?
It's interesting because like that whole workflow, I think, I mean, this is kind of branching into a different conversation here, but that whole workflow is something that we've been struggling with working with clients every day. And there is a opportunity, and I don't really want to build it, to be quite honest with you, because it sounds big and hard to build, and I don't really want a big, hard thing to build right now. But What's interesting is that it's becoming clear that there is a workflow for working with AI that needs to be better supported by a tool set, right? And the workflow, what we've been finding is, as we've been implementing stuff for clients, is we need a better, more effective way to evaluate and understand how the quality of prompts. We need a better way to iterate on prompts in a headless manner so that we don't have to deploy the entire app every time we tweak a couple words in the prompt. We want to be able to, in a headless way, like a headless CMS, manage the prompt outside of the application, and then be able to also test different models with the same prompt, different models with different prompts, and somehow qualitatively score the results of those, and then use that to influence what the app is actually using for the model and prompt combination, because it really is coming down to that, right? Which model and which prompt, and then eventually which fine tuning.
Yeah. So
those become the components, the levers that you use. And there's going to be a need for better tooling and workflow around dealing with that long term.
couldn't uh, couldn't disagree at all. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that we solved that problem on my side project, SaaSrock, by building a prompt flow builder inside of our tool, specifically because one of my friends is building a SaaS out of Embark Collective in Tampa, and every time he wants to update his prompt, he has to go to the dev team, right? Which is
right.
like
can't do it because you can't iterate faster than that. Yeah.
And so we created a CMS for prompts and prompt flows inside of SaaSrock, specifically so the product managers, the marketers, whoever's using the prompts can change the model, can change the prompts, and can get their results instantaneously with testing.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's awful, right? But you still want managed prompts, and I think that's like right now. The two approaches are just give everyone OpenAI for $20, right? Like,
Sure.
that works. But it's unmanaged then. Like, you don't have shared prompts. You don't have automated prompts, right? You can't trigger a prompt easily that way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, anyway, we found that to be like, it was a non-starter. And so when we were launching the last company we were launching the MVP with, it very, very quickly, I was like, we are not going to have to go to a developer to do prompts because this is awful. So we built, so I talked to the guy behind SaaSrock. He built it into the platform, and it really, really, that was probably the primary driver of fast success. Right. Because we no longer needed the dev team. Anytime you have to get the dev team involved, it just grinds to a damn halt.
Yep. Yep,
I
absolutely.
I know you're part of that dev team, but like the product.
Well, but any dev team, I mean, the problem is, even if it were me and I had to deploy code to change a prompt, if it were just me working on a project, right? But I still had to deploy code, the deployment pipeline takes time and it's complicated, especially if you have automated testing in the pipeline and other things like that. You're talking about a pipeline that might take 10 minutes to get to production, right? And if you need to test it in production, if you can't easily test it locally, and generally, if you're a solo dev, you can just test it locally. But as soon as you involve another person in the mix and you have to push to production every time to test a prompt, I don't care how fast you are as a dev, it's not fast enough because it has to be at the speed of seconds, not at the speed of minutes.
And I think what's really interesting about this stuff is you need the data especially if you're building like prompts inside of a company or a business or a product, right? You need the data from the database to be able to put into the prompts, right? And which is really kind of painful to do manually. So you're either stuck with doing it manually slow or going to developer slow. And so I think that managed prompt flow, and yes, I use it in SaaSrock because that's what I'm familiar with. I'm sure there are some other tools, and I have done some testing with some other tools, but I don't think there's a great long-term non productized solution, but like a chaining solution that exists today that really makes this easy.
And it's actually a pretty hard problem to solve, because in our case, in our prompts, we are injecting context into the prompts in real time at runtime,
Yeah, so
right?
are we.
And so we are saying we have variables in the prompts where we're saying, I want you to create content based on in real time, this thing that I'm pulling out of the database in real time. And what's interesting about that is depending on what it's pulling out of the database completes the prompt differently and you get different results, right? And that's a hard thing to do in a kind of headless way because now you have to pull in the context, you have to do the variable completions, you have to do all of that kind of stuff. So it's like not as simple as just like sort of slapping a like contentful or something like that on the other side and just pulling in text prompts. It's this nuanced management that is actually in an interesting way. I'm trying to think if this is true. It's a type of content management that I don't think that we as web developers have ever really had to deal with, because typically speaking, the content management that we've done is either done in the code directly, putting the content into the code, right, which is generally not a great idea, but can be fine depending on the application, or it's completely removed and it's like decoupled to the point where the content doesn't know anything about the context it's being used in, which is in general a good thing because you have this complete separation between content and presentation and functionality and that kind of thing. But the problem is that when you get into AI prompting, you actually get into a situation where you need this middle ground, where you need mostly decoupled managed content, but you also need that content to have an awareness of where it is running at any given time, because that changes how it runs. It's like Schrodinger's code. And that's a really interesting problem because I'm trying to think in my career if I've ever dealt with content that was like that.
So
And I don't
you
think I have.
Yeah, so in marketing, the way you do that is like there's A/B testing, right? And so there
Sure.
might be like section A changes
Yep.
based upon a variable B or just
Yeah.
randomly, right? So there is some logic that sometimes happens in marketing, but usually in more sophisticated stuff.
Right.
But generally, no, like content is like static, and so you just create content and it exists.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I assume you guys are using something like if then statements inside of a prompt or so we really have it's called the prompt like preprocessor. And then we have
Yeah.
if then statements. And then if variable A happens to be true, then render this portion of the prompt. If variable B happens
Yeah.
to be true, render this portion of the prompt, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we compose prompts. So we have a lot of smaller prompts that then get composed. There's like a composition step, right? Where we essentially pre-prepare the prompts by like injecting variables. Then we have these little prompts, right? That all then get assembled. I To be honest, when I built the proof of concept, this is how I did it. I don't know if this is how we actually do it in production, but essentially we had then you have all these little prompts, do this, and then it goes through this assembly step that takes all the prompts and assembles it into a large prompt before sending it off. And all that happens dynamically based on what's going on in the app at any given time. So it's kind of a composition model,
yeah,
but there is some logic. There's some switching, right? Like if this, then use that prompt. If that, then use this prompt. If whatever, include this bit. If we're doing this task, include this little chunk of the prompt and compose it into it, right? It's sort of how we're handling that, I think. Yeah.
well, I think that's the right way to do it. One, two, I'm trying to like that's kind of interesting, like the composition approach. It makes for much harder testing.
It does,
It makes for much
because
harder testing
right,
because
because you're dealing with combinations of, like, imagine like each prompt is a little block, but each output can be any combination of all the little blocks with the context that is injected in. So you end up with this kind of vast array of potential things that does get very difficult to test.
yeah, that's really
Yeah.
I'm trying to just think that one through, because we already found it hard just by doing simple like switch statements. So, give you an example. I can't think of a great example. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So if this field is blank, don't render this field, right? So if null, empty, otherwise put this pretext in here and then render the field into it. So that's like one, like the simple example, but then like some switching, some switcher cases in like coding terms, right? Like, hey, if the price range is X to Y, then focus more on Z. If the price range is above that, more than focus on this. If the price range is astronomical, then maybe write in this style. And so styles are interesting, right? Because you usually have the ability to take data, interpret that data, and then say, oh, you know what, we know that we should switch our style based upon our audience. But a computer doesn't necessarily know that. And so one, you give it the context, so we tell it what the audience is, but two, then we say we prefer you to write in this style based upon this audience. And we found really, really good results by doing something like shifting the style, and doing that programmatically instead of, and we found that we had to do everything in one prompt basically. And instead of having 50 prompts, because we found it was actually almost impossible to manage 50 prompts and the permutations that go with that. Anyway,
it's interesting to think about, like, for pricing, right? Like, this is a really interesting use case for kind of conditional prompts, which is the idea that if you're, say, using AI at scale to write marketing material or product descriptions or something like that, right? Where the price of the product is unknown, and depending on the price, unknown theoretically at the time that you write the prompt, because it's many products, and how you would sell something that is low cost versus very high cost premium, you write the sales stuff completely differently. You write the marketing stuff completely, you focus on different value, different things, right? And the idea that, like, based on a variable like price that's injected in real time, you use a different prompt in order to customize what gets focused on, is a pretty sophisticated way of thinking about content generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's again, neither of us can talk about our client work, but like,
Right.
there's some really neat stuff you can do with that kind of approach. And the thing is, the other approach, which we also enabled in our prompt builder, right, for that, especially for that client, was that you can insert like a variable selector. So instead of coming up and saying we want this style for based upon the price automatically, which I like programmatically, right, to be like very explicit. The other option is to just say, okay, I want XYZ. And then you see this in some of the other AI tools. They have like some very simplistic, what style do you want? Boom, 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 boom. So you can say premium, affordable, whatever. And those aren't really styles, but like, you could use the idea of luxury versus super luxury, or econo motel, right? Like, like all the way up and down the chain. You could go through that process and say, write it in each of these styles as well. And so you could use variables that a user could select at the runtime. But the problem with that is, like, now you've injected a human in the middle approach. And the whole advantage of AI is not needing a human in the middle.
Right.
Right. And so, like, I don't necessarily love that approach.
Yeah.
I'm very much about the programmatic value of AI. And so I like to codify that kind of logic into my prompts, so that the prompts get the best results. They run explicitly. And again, I say this all the time on my coaching and consulting, but like the biggest enabler that most executives have is when they can teach their team to help them edit and not author, right? If an executive has to author things, like they're spending all their mental cycles on that instead of improving everybody, or
Yep.
improving, right? Well, AI enables everyone to edit, not author. And so if you have to be involved in the authoring process, I think you've done it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. You're kind of not taking advantage of what AI is really giving you at that point. Yeah. It's
And
interesting.
still, we're still talking about this stuff being so cheap, right? Really, at the end of the day, it is so cheap that if you aren't sure what style you want, put it in a grid and insert all the styles. And so you
Yeah.
end up with, hey, for
Yeah.
this product, here is it written in, in luxury, super luxury, and, gajillion
Playful,
luxury.
serious,
Yeah,
right? Whatever. Yep.
whatever. And you can end up with all of them and you can read them all and go, you know what, I kind of like this one versus this one. And
Mm-hmm.
so you get all of them for the price for yes, it costs a teeny bit more to run more than one query, but like it's all
Mm-hmm.
cheaper than you spending 5 minutes trying to do it yourself. And now
Yeah.
you have all the different permutations.
Yeah. It's really, and this is where I think in 2024, this is kind of going to be one of the big topics of conversation is going to be development workflow around this stuff, right? Like we've had a year now since this stuff's been out. Practically speaking, we've probably had about 6 to 8 months of like people actually using this stuff, right? I mean, since 4 came out, and over the summer when you just saw a massive uptick in people adopting this and started to build things around it. I think next year in 2024 is when we start to see some maturity in the workflow of dealing with AI inside of product development.
I think so. And I think you'll find that there will be some good homegrown solutions. There'll be some good open source solutions, but I think you're going to find some really good SaaS tools that are specifically just built to make this
Mm-hmm.
easier. Um,
Yeah.
and my opinion on using SaaS tools. They're a pain in the butt because you end up with like 100 of them. The average SaaS has 150 SaaS tools.
Doesn't surprise me.
um,
Doesn't surprise me. So here's something that I did find the other day, and I've not played with this yet, but I'll show it to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is this LM Studio. I found this like this morning, actually, which is a local piece of software designed for running LLMs locally and testing different models and different prompts on your local machine. This is the kind of thing that we're going to see a ton more of very soon.
And I think that's fantastic for like our general use cases that we just experiment with, right?
Yep.
Where it kind of, I think, will suck is those use cases that need the data and the context. Right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they solve for that. And if they already do, actually. Hell, I might just install it and we might just take a look at it real quick and see what it does. I definitely am starting to get a glimpse that the future, at least the most near-term future, is going to involve programmatically stitching multiple models together, as opposed to just sort of naively using the ChatGPT API, right? I think that this is maybe where, and honestly, I feel like my thoughts on this have changed over the past month. And this will likely be the thing that keeps some developers employed for a while longer, which is that it still takes code to do this. It still takes technical knowledge to do this. And the idea that like there will be more and more of these open source models, and more closed source, but for purchase models that you can basically assemble together and say, this model's really good at this particular thing. And we got this model and we fine-tuned it for this thing. And then we have this model, we fine-tuned it for this thing. And then we combine those models together and we use them all in concert to create the end product. I feel like is going to be where this is going to end up.
I don't. Yes and no. So I think one of the challenges with this is they all improve so fast. And so knowing that model A is better at a specific thing for a small period of time, I'm not saying this is the case, but could almost be irrelevant because it changes so fast. That model B might be better tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And how much overhead is there in always comparing these versus finding one that does generally best for you and becoming an expert at that model and that usage?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to send you a link here. Can you open it up for the crowd? Sent it to you in Discord.
Can you see that?
I cannot. There you go.
Okay.
So you might want to close your messages.
Just probably so. We'll just cut that part out.
I didn't see anything like dangerous or anything, but
no.
So this guy posted this and I responded yesterday. I actually just shared it because I did also notice this, right? So they talked about the result sets and generally how good the results are. And so if you scroll down, it has a rating. And this ELO rating, right, is really just the higher the better. But let's be super simplistic. But I really like the way they even showed the licenses of these.
Yeah.
And so like Mistral right now is by far, the best open source model. By far. Everything above it is a proprietary.
Yep.
But when I used Claude, like I definitely noticed that it kind of sucked compared to OpenAI. When I experimented with Gemini with you a couple times, the results were really not that impressive, right? Sure, some of the multimodal stuff, some of these guys do better with one day versus another. But generally, I think this is a problem for the industry. OpenAI is just so much better at getting consistently good results than any of the other ones. So, wow, and the thing is, it's so cheap. So running this yourself is not necessarily cheaper than using OpenAI, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of true. All right. So like, I'm not saying, I'm not by any. So this is the beautiful thing is I think in the way this one actually works, you put something in there and then you vote on what's the best one. And you don't know which model it is. And so, right. So you're putting your prompt in there. Oh, that's so meta. It's not even funny. For those.
Interesting. Look at this. Oh no. That's interesting that it actually started to do it. And then it and we don't know which one is being pitted against the other.
Right. And so the way this works is you're actually just voting based upon the results, right? And based on those results, they're taking like, hey, with this model, one versus the other model. So this is actually a super interesting approach because I will go ahead and say, I think the other one was going to be better, but it aired out. It looked better. but it aired out. So I don't know that you can actually judge this, right? Because
I don't think I can. Yeah.
um,
I wonder if it just randomly
do a new round. Yeah,
and it just randomly picks models,
yeah, that's just randomly picking models, and so like it's
right? An ad selling live pure.
yeah, yeah,
Is that what that stuff is?
weight loss. For those who
Weight
didn't,
loss.
we haven't posted it yet, so you couldn't watch it. But we're doing a series on myth busting, get rich quick schemes, and this one happens to be it's not really a get rich scheme, and it's not really, but it's about using affiliate marketing.
Yep.
And so in this particular case, Live Pure was part of the test. And
Hmm. So model B much faster here. Now,
yep,
can you, after you vote, learn which model is which? We're gonna find out.
we're gonna find out.
So okay, ahoy, fellow weight loss seekers!
That's all.
Ahoy, children!
Yeah,
That's terrible.
I can't. It's like without even reading the rest of it, B is better, right? Like the intro. If that's your
Yeah,
intro, you've just lost everybody. Um,
yeah, for
are
sure.
you tired of being overweight and unhealthy? Also, not the best, but it's better, right?
It's better, right? So B is better. So let's see what happens. Gemini Pro versus Dolphin Mistral 7B. This is really fascinating. This is how you do. I mean, it's probably worth every time you put a prompt into ChatGPT, coming and copying it over here and running it just to develop a sense for what models perform better in what scenarios.
Yeah. So it's super. I think it's super interesting. But I personally have noticed the same kind of thing. So generally, my answer is yes, you should be testing, right? You absolutely should be testing. However, if you're trying to move fast, you cannot go wrong by using OpenAI right now.
No, I mean, it's clearly the best, still the leader. Will we be saying that a year from now? I don't know. I don't know. I tell you what, I tell you what's interesting is one thing that I've thought about, and honestly, I've not done a lot of research into this, so like this may come off as like incredibly not aware of what's happening. But I hear, Facebook is developing Llama. Google is obviously has their
DeepMind
stuff
and everything else, Gemini.
and everything else, a million different things.
Yeah.
We have an open AI. Where is Amazon in this?
Oh, Amazon has a big. They actually already have a service for you to generate your own LLMs and train them. So like,
But where is their model that they're training?
um, it's a model that you can use as a service. So just yeah, open up.
What is
We're
it
gonna
called?
open up the internet and share your screen, and we'll explore it together.
Let's see.
Um,
Um,
you are not sharing your screen in case you think.
no, I am not. I am. What is the equivalent of the
Yep.
of
Yeah, and
Gemini from Amazon?
well, do well, do Olympus.
Olympus. So they don't have one out yet.
Well, they do. So actually, go to just AWS. Type in AWS LLM or AWS AI or LLM. Yeah, let's just see what.
Put in all the things.
There you go. The first one, right? Um, go
Yeah,
on.
but this is a framework. No, this is a course.
Oh,
This is a framework. It's not an actual LLM model.
there you go. It's generative. April 2 Titan models, right?
Titan. Titan.
Titan. So now search Amazon Titan or AWS Titan because it's so hard to find anything on Amazon's website.
Foundational model for generative AI.
There you go. And they do last I checked, they have quite a few things.
It's interesting how little I've heard about this.
Um, I think what you'd find is it's not as sexy. The results probably, I actually don't know this for a fact, so don't sue me, Amazon. The results might not be as good, but the advantage it has over um, OpenAI is like the idea of security that Amazon has that OpenAI is not well known for yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I think that Amazon has to become a major player in this at some point.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think the reality is like there are only 4 companies that can do this to do it well. There really are. It's Facebook, Google,
Google, Amazon.
Amazon, and Microsoft, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why,
Yeah.
why do I say that?
Essentially the FANG companies.
Why do I say that? It's so damn expensive, right? You essentially
to
have to
train these models, yeah, computationally speaking. Yes.
computationally, it's
Yeah.
so expensive.
Yep. Yep.
And it
Yep.
sounds weird because we talk about how cheap all this stuff is all the time. It's really cheap for an individual prompt. However, you
Yeah.
need billions of these things for it to end up making sense, and it starts to add up very, very fast.
Yeah. 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 I'm interested to see what comes out of folks like Netflix, who have a very unique data set. Amazon also has this in the entertainment world. Because like a company like Netflix also has the horsepower to potentially do this.
Yeah, but I think Netflix is an interesting company, right? Culturally, they've always had high performers who burn out, right? They pay extremely well. They pay cash extremely well compared to most companies that might be more equity based. And you work your ass off until you're fired or quit, right?
Yeah.
And but they've always been fairly focused on their use case,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I think the difference with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google is that they experiment in a way um, that is just different. By the way, obviously Apple is like a player. We're not talking about Apple because they don't have one open. I think we all
So
admit they're working
I
on.
also think this is like a weird, and I mean, a lot of people are talking about this too, which is like Apple is strangely silent in this whole thing.
Yeah, if I had to guess, the Apple is actually in a super good spot because of their chip dominance. Um,
Yep.
like
Yep.
they're going to be able to iterate and generate chips with the GPUs that are actually able to take advantage of this stuff on the phone,
Yeah.
on the hardware, computer, desktop, tablet, whatever.
Yep.
And even the Vision Pro, right? Like, so they're, it's undoubtable that they're working on this stuff, right?
They have to be.
They have to be.
So
And,
2024 Apple Dev Day, do we see an LLM announcement from Apple?
um,
And is it a partnership with an existing one that has been customized to the devices, or is it a homegrown built solution?
I do believe it will be I could be wrong. So this will be fun. Fact check me. I do believe it'll be a homegrown solution, and I believe they've been working on a lot of different AI stuff, right?
Yep.
And it won't be like it'll be a multimodal solution, right? It won't be
It'll
just
have to be.
it's going to be a multimodal solution. And I think it's going to go beyond LLM. Right? It's going to be beyond that. I think pretty dramatically, because they have like the advantage of your data. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of like weird apps that are like, hey, we're going to help you. We're going to be the ultimate note taking app and all this other stuff. But ultimately, Apple adding that stuff into the OS directly is going to change the world. So when you start searching for something, it's going to know what you're searching for. It's going to open the app you want, the file
Yeah.
you want. Like their penetration of this is potentially going to be usable in other ways. But I
Yeah.
really think it's going to be like a massive accelerant for the phone and the computer on the core things. And I think they're going to focus more on that than anywhere else.
Yeah, and we'll probably see, unless this is already a thing, but I don't think that it is. We'll probably see the release of AI Kit.
I do believe that's a thing.
Is it already a thing? Is AI Kit already a
I
thing?
think it's I think that's a thing already. Yeah, I kid Apple. It is a thing.
Is it?
Uh,
No, it is not a thing in the way that you think.
well, they have Core ML.
They have, yeah, they have CoreML, but I think
I think it's
I
Core ML. I mean,
I think AI Kit is going to actually be the interface layer that developers use to integrate AI into their apps easily, into native iOS apps. I think there's going to be an API, an AI Kit layer, just like Health Kit, just like all the other things, which provide like the SDKs, hide all the complexity, and allow turnkey inclusion of AI stuff into iOS apps. And I bet that gets launched in 2024.
yeah. I mean, I think you're not wrong that they're going to add stuff, but Core ML already does like natural language processing, speech to
Yeah.
text, sound analysis for audio, vision analysis, and image analysis. So a lot of this does exist, but they've been focusing it on the hardware level to accelerate
Yeah.
every developer. It will be interesting to see what happens when it's like just more, better, faster, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Would be
What's
very interesting.
Obviously I think we've both had to develop apps, and for businesses you always have to use iOS and Android.
Yeah.
And I'm not shitting on Android, but I hate Android.
Ugh. I used to be a big fanboy.
I know. And the thing is, until you have to build B2B apps and they have to deal with the low end Androids, right? Or
yeah, or you just have to use an Android phone.
I'm not trying to be that mean. I'm talking like, hey, our customers just bought the $25 knockoff Android from China, and they're complaining that it's slow and doesn't run well. Well, no shit, you bought a $25 phone, people. Like, his CPU doesn't even like, it's like 100 megahertz. Okay, it's not that bad, but like, it's bad, right?
Yeah.
And I think the consistency of using, the Apple ecosystem does give you things that the Android one doesn't. And we used Maui, but there's React Native. There's all kinds of ways that you can build and launch in both places. But the problem is then you lose some of that nuance of the really nice things that Apple gives you.
It'll be interesting to see the integration, like what you were talking about earlier. It'll be interesting to see the integration of pulling AI into, say, Finder in Mac, right? So to where your future searches for files are not asterisk logo dot asterisk to try to find a logo in whatever format, but it's now just find me my logo for company name that I did last summer.
Yeah. Or just,
right.
Can you show me all the logos that I've ever done?
Right. 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 Right.
And I think that's when things are going to get really interesting, right? Because let's say you use a tool like Figma and you have logos buried in a Figma file on a specific page, right?
Yep.
Like, that's when it's going to be really interesting for it, because that's not a file, right? And like,
No.
how do you surface that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're really prepared for the storage requirements for what AI is going to need in the future. Because for AI to truly get all of that, it's going to have contextual clues that you are working on logos at a particular point in time, in a particular point in software, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everything's going to be time series, right? All data is going to have to be time series, which blows up how much data you need. This stuff is so cool.
Yeah.
But on that note, we should probably wrap up the show and go from there.
Yes. Yeah.